Greetings from London, and welcome to this special showing of classic monster movies here on the Sci Fi Channel. I'm Christopher Lee, and tonight I'll introduce you to Dracula's Daughter. Universal commissioned several versions of the story. One, by screenwriter John Balderston, portrayed Dracula's daughter as a dominatrix driven to torture men with whips and chains. Universal thanked Mr. Balderston and kept looking. The final version is voluptuous indeed, but in a very different way. You'll see what I mean as the magnetic Gloria Holden portrays Dracula's daughter. The offspring of the great Dracula is played by Gloria Holden, chosen for her dark features reminiscent of Bela Lugosi's. But don't look for Lugosi in this film. The flashback to Dracula features a wax dummy that looks less like Lugosi than Gloria Holden does. Lugosi was signed to do this movie, but was mysteriously paid off, his services unused. Even so, rabid vampire fans will find plenty to enjoy as the Sci Fi Channel continues this special showing of Dracula's Daughter. Notice the unusual decor of Countess Sekei's home. It has no mirrors. Of course, vampires show no reflection in mirrors, so Dracula's daughter would avoid anything that might reveal her secret. In 1936, Hollywood censors were more worried by the reflection of lesbianism. The Hayes office closely supervised the magical attraction between the Countess and the innocent Lily. They also removed a scene depicting the Countess feeding a live baby as a late-night snack to Dracula's vampire wives, a scene deemed too horrifying even for Dracula's daughter. Classic Monster Month on the Sci Fi Channel will continue with Dracula's Daughter in just a moment. Here on the Sci Fi Channel. The Universal picture Dracula's Daughter was originally inspired by Bram Stoker's story Dracula's Guest, but it was MGM's David O. Selznick who purchased the rights from Stoker's widow, Frances. MGM developed the project in secret using the code name Tarantula. Fearing a legal battle, MGM sold their treatment to Universal, which completely changed the story without asking further permission from the Stoker estate. You see, by then it was discovered that in America, Dracula was in the public domain. Stoker had neglected to file 2 copies of his novel with the Copyright Office, thus failing to stake a proper claim. Now, back to Dracula's Daughter here on the Sci Fi Channel. Daughter here on the Sci Fi Channel. And so ends the story of Dracula's Daughter. Years later, when I played the Count, I always drew blood in Technicolor. In these early Universal films, the camera discreetly pans or cuts away before the fatal moment. That leaves the details to the viewer's imagination, lending these films a certain Victorian charm. I'm Christopher Lee, and I hope you'll join me again tomorrow here on the Sci Fi Channel for another classic monster movie, Son of Dracula. Greetings from London, and welcome to another of the Sci Fi Channel's special showing of classic monster movies. I'm Christopher Lee, and it's my pleasure to present to you Universal's 1943 blood chiller, Son of Dracula. Of course, Bela Lugosi starred in the original Dracula. However, Lon Chaney Jr. was a bigger draw, so Lugosi was counted out. One reviewer dismissed Chaney's performance, saying that he was far too well fed to be convincing as a bloodsucker. Other reviewers praised the understated dignity of Chaney's Dracula. Why don't you be the judge as we enjoy Son of Dracula? Son of Dracula, Lon Chaney Jr. is Count Alucard. Of course, the real meaning of that name is revealed when it's read backwards. Of all the Draculas, Chaney's portrayal in this film displays the most reverence for traditional moral values. After all, his is the only Dracula ever get legally married. The rest of us relied merely on blood ties. Now, back to Son of Dracula. Vampire legends are as old as humankind. They derive from rituals that required drinking blood or eating body parts to absorb the strength of a dead victim. Usually, that victim was an animal. Throughout the Dark Ages, all sorts of diseases were blamed on the evil spirits believed to be sucking the life out of loved ones. But Count Dracula was probably most inspired by the bloody tyrant Vlad Tepes. Vlad was a 15th century Romanian ruler who liked to dispatch his enemies, skewering them on sharp stakes, hence his nickname Vlad the Impaler. By Victorian times, the vampire myths were imbued with strong sexual overtones. Indeed, the Universal's vampires are seething with restrained passion, as we see in Son of Dracula. Classic Monster Month on the Sci Fi Channel will continue with Son of Dracula in just a moment, here on the Sci Fi Channel. You may have heard that Lon Chaney Jr. and Bela Lugosi had a well-publicized rivalry that began at Universal over the role of Dracula. Director Reginald Leborg recalls that on the set of The Black Sleep, Lugosi insulted Chaney, whereupon Chaney lifted up the older, smaller actor by his shirt. Crew members pulled the two men apart. It might have made an interesting sequel, Dracula. But now, the Sci Fi Channel continues its special showing of classic monster movies as we return to Son of Dracula. I hope you enjoyed Son of Dracula. We close with this historic footnote. In the early days of Christianity, many people were tried and executed for being werewolves, but no one was formally accused of being a vampire. It seems the early church authorities of Central Europe believed in werewolves, but considered vampire tales to be primitive superstition. The word vampire, spelled with a Y, did not appear in the English language until 1734. Our modern notion of Dracula is a completely literary one, enhanced by filmmakers over the past 70 years, and enhanced again tomorrow as the Sci Fi Channel presents House of Dracula. I'm Christopher Lee. Good night. Good evening from London. I'm Christopher Lee, and I'm pleased to be your host as the Sci Fi Channel continues this special showing of classic monster movies. This week is devoted to that bundle of menace, The Mummy. Like the original Mummy, produced 8 years before, this 1940 film was slickly produced on a tight budget. You may notice some stock footage that appeared in The Mummy. And if you're a true horror fan, you'll recognize the same musical score created for Son of Frankenstein. Tom Tyler, a popular cowboy star, plays the mummy Caris. If you long for Boris Karloff's performance, watch closely. You can see him in the wide shots of the temple scene, intercut with Tyler's close-ups. Now, prepare to enjoy that, and other sleights of hand. The Mummy's Hand. Good evening from London. I'm Christopher Lee, and it's my pleasure to present this special showing of classic monster films for the Sci Fi Channel. Tonight, The Mummies 2. This 1942 Universal film features most of the cast from The Mummy's Hand, with a notable exception. Today's mummy is played by Lon Chaney Jr. Of course, Lon Chaney Sr. was famous as the man of 1,000 faces in the silent film era. He discouraged his son's acting career, and the young Chaney didn't even begin until after his father's death. Lon Jr.'s real name was Creighton Chaney. For years, he resisted the studio's pressure to adopt his father's name. But when he agreed, the horror movie roles came pouring in. For this film, Universal decided Chaney was big enough to drop the Junior, much to the actor's dismay. But now, prepare to tingle as our tale of ancient revenge continues as the Sci Fi Channel brings you this special showing of The Mummy's Tomb. Good evening from London, and thank you for joining me for the Sci Fi Channel's special showing of classic monster movies. I'm Christopher Lee. The Mummy Caris returns in this fourth of the Universal Mummy films, The Mummy's Ghost. Lon Chaney Jr. plays the mummy, and he was less than thrilled about it. He complained frequently about how the costume and makeup was hot, itchy, and covered his acting talents. Some accused Chaney of venting his frustration through overacting. When the script called for the mummy to strangle Professor Norman, Chaney almost choked actor Frank Reicher unconscious. When breakaway glass museum doors failed to arrive, Chaney was directed to just push them open. Feeling robust, Chaney instead crashed through the plate glass, cutting his hand through the bandages. I had a similar experience when I played the mummy. Some monsters can never have enough bandages, as we're about to find out. I'm Christopher Lee, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Sci Fi Channel special showing of classic monster films. Tonight, the last in the Mummy series by Universal, The Mummy's Curse. Yesterday, in The Mummy's Ghost, we saw the mummy, Caris, and his reincarnated princess, Ananka, sink slowly into a Massachusetts swamp. Today's movie returns to that swamp, which is now, inexplicably, in a Louisiana bayou. This enormous bit of artistic license let Universal mingle the Egyptian mythology with the exotic voodoo traditions of the Cajun swampland. The results, as you will see, are suitably chilling.